All right. Hello and welcome to the Middle East Forum Speaker Webinar Series and Podcast. I'm Stacey Roman and I will be moderating this discussion today. We're pleased to have Hanin Ghaddar, the Friedmann Senior Fellow in the Washington Institute's Linda and Tony Rubin program on Arab politics, join us to discuss Hezbollah's quandary, more power but more hatred. Ms. Ghaddar will speak for 15 minutes, then followed by 15 minutes of Q&A from our audience. Should you wish to ask a question, please use the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen to type your question. And with that, I'll turn the discussion over to Ms. Hanin Ghaddar.
Hi, thank you very much for having me. I'm going to just start with the most recent event to describe the phenomena that you just talked about. Recently in Lebanon, we have realized a very alarming trend of more security incidents. And it is partly because of the economic crisis and the political void in state institutions. But it's also because it's not like the security institutions have collapsed, but Hezbollah is becoming very adamant on maintaining, and widening their control over security institutions, state institutions, and even financial institutions, as the economic collapse have started in 2019. So, in a way, Hezbollah has gained a lot since then, but also have lost a lot. Let me start with what it has gained. It has gained its regional power. They have spread, they have moved, transformed from Iran's Lebanon militia to Iran's main regional army, basically. And this has become really apparent with Qasem Soleimani, who was assassinated by the US in 2020. But in a way, Hezbollah's regional power has empowered him, empowered the group, but it has also thinned them throughout the region. They have gained regional power. They have gained regional access through the Iranian IRGC, but that also meant that they have had to shift their budget to thin out their resources to cover their operations in the Middle East. Meanwhile, the sanctions on Iran had increased. The sanctions on Hezbollah's allies in Lebanon also kicked off, and Hezbollah found itself struggling between shifting their budget from Lebanon to a regional kind of operations, but also trying to find alternatives to compensate for the loss of cash coming from Iran, which they didn't have to deal with financial issues before. And today they find themselves responsible for compensating the void in their financial institutions, their own financial institutions. And then came the Lebanon's economic crisis, and they have found that they have to also compensate their constituency for what they lost from the services of the state, a Lebanese state. They have gained a lot of power. They have gained the know-hows on precision missiles weapons. They have developed their drone expertise and knowledge and operations. Militarily, they have gained more, but at the same time, their weapons have now the goal of their weapons today has shifted as well. It is more today used to threaten Israel and the region, but it's not really that effective, because they know that once they use them, they lose them. So they have gained a lot militarily and in security institutions in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, etc. They have gained a lot of access to these state institutions and security institutions, but their hands are tied in terms of when and how to use them against Israel, because there's always this understanding in Iran and within Hezbollah and in Lebanon that the war is going to be a lot more costly than the threat of the war. And they understand that, but they're using this gap, this war between the wars, or the threats that they have been investing in until the next war, to strengthen their control within state institutions in all the region, but mainly in Lebanon. They have definitely gained more control in state institutions. They have benefited from the financial crisis, and we can talk a lot about that. We have just published a study earlier this summer about the cash economy in Lebanon and how it has influenced and benefited Hezbollah's financial flow of money. The work, the collaboration with the central bank and with the collaboration between Hezbollah, the central bank, and the money institutions, private money institutions in Lebanon, have also benefited Hezbollah greatly in terms of the flow of cash and how they benefit from the crisis. So the crisis benefited them in terms of the flow of cash economy, and I can go into the details of that, but it has also tied them in the sense that there's a lot of Hezbollah lost the resources of the state institutions that they used to employ. Like in 2018, it was the high time, the ideal time for Hezbollah when they have won the parliamentary elections with their allies. They have definitely gained more access to state institutions. They had the president, their ally, their main ally, President Shia, as the president. They had Berry in the house. They had a government that they were able to access and infiltrate. They were having the best time of their lives. But at the same time, in 2018, this happened. In 2019, the country collapsed. Their access to state institutions is beneficial in the sense that they can make the decisions. They still have the access to security and military institutions, and to a certain extent, financial institutions when the banking system collapsed in Lebanon. But they also lost. They are also struggling because of that with their constituency. Their own constituency today. Before the crisis, they used to use the state institutions to cater for their constituency, in addition to Hezbollah's and Iran's institutions and budget. Today, they are solely responsible for taking care of their constituency and the rest of the Lebanese who are under their allies' constituency. So they have today to deal with this increasing need and dissatisfaction among their constituency of basically the narrative that Hezbollah have brought to the Shia community, that you are my citizens, I am your father figure, I protect you, I provide for you, I give you your identity, which is more of a Shia identity, but you have to be loyal to me. And the Shia have done that for many years. And today, the father figure cannot really provide or protect the way they used to. And in the sense, it's Hezbollah has really the first blow actually happened last year in the last most recent parliamentary elections when they lost the majority. They lost the majority in the parliament, which didn't really translate into losing access and control over state institutions. However, it makes decision-making and imposing their agenda a lot more complicated. For example, today, Hezbollah cannot really impose Soleimani Frangieh, their presidential candidate, on the Lebanese. There are a lot of opposition in the parliament. They don't have the majority to actually go for Soleimani Frangieh, and they need more people to get him up there. That's why they are now reconsidering their alliance with the FBM. Gibran Bassil, the former president's son-in-law and the president of the Free Patriotic Movement, has been trying to play hard in terms of getting Hezbollah to do what he wants, and he was very disgruntled when he was not considered their presidential candidate. So the memorandum of understanding between the Free Patriotic Movement and Hezbollah got shaky for a little bit, but that, of course, is not the end of it, because now they're back together on the table to discuss the new deal of what Bassil can get in return of of their own, to vote for their own candidates. So there might actually be a chance for Sulaiman Franji to become the next president in Lebanon. We know that he is Bashar al-Assad's candidate. We know that he is a Syrian regime loyalist. And we also know that he is a Hezbollah Iran puppet. So if the FBM Hezbollah's memorandum of understanding was revived, then the next few years would be very grim for Lebanon. Very, very bad. It's not easy for them because they lost the majority, but they can still work it. They still have their arms. Their arms are today more directed at the Lebanese people. They haven't used their arms against Israel since 2006. They have been threatening with their arms. There have been a lot of tension along the border, but they do understand the risks. That's very calculated, and they do not want a war because they cannot afford a war, because the next war is going to be much more existential than the current situation. The next war with Israel is going to be a really big war that would involve all their weaponry, all their resources, everything they have, and they do not want to do this now. They do not have that budget for that kind of war. So their arms, meanwhile, are pointed internally in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, etc. And in Lebanon, because their guns are pointed internally, the people today are more and more disillusioned with Hezbollah's narrative. People realize that the resistance is dead. People realize that Hezbollah's narrative of protecting Lebanon, protecting the Shia, providing, etc., is no longer viable, including the Shia community. And I wrote a whole book about that. Not everyone in the Shia community is today okay with Hezbollah. It started in 2007 when Hezbollah used their arms for the first time against the Lebanese people. It started in Beirut and the Druze mountains. So it was basically targeting the Sunnis and the Druze. But these are Lebanese people. And despite all the political differences, using the arms actually to impose your agenda in Lebanon and go to the Doha Forum and the Doha Accord and get the government that you want, it's still something that, despite the fact that many considered it a win, it really hurt Hezbollah in the sense that they can actually use their arms against the Lebanese, not just Israel. So the resistance is no longer a resistance, it's a political tool. This is the first revelation. The second time, it was much more it was regional when they went to Syria. A lot of people thought that they were going to Syria to protect Lebanon's borders, but that was no longer an issue. That narrative completely collapsed when they went to areas that have nothing to do with the Lebanese border, that are mostly, or even Shia areas, when they went to Aleppo, when they were everywhere in Syria, and they are really engaged in protecting the Assad regime rather than protecting Lebanon. But the real blow to Hezbollah's narrative and Hezbollah's popularity in Lebanon happened in 2019 with the 2019 protests, when the Lebanese people went to the street. They were not really going against Hezbollah. They were going against corruption. They were in the street protesting the corrupt political system, the system that is protecting corruption, not really realizing how Hezbollah is linked to the system. Many people who are not followers or activists of the political scene in the political scene in Lebanon did not really understand the link between Hezbollah and the corrupt political system until 2019, when everybody went to the street to protest the corruption, to protest the system, to protest sectarianism, and then Hezbollah decided to stand with the corrupt system against the protesters, not only in political statements by Hassan Nasrallah himself and others, but also Hezbollah sent their thugs to the streets. They beat up protesters. They destroyed the tents that were set up in downtown Beirut. They were really vicious. And it was very clear that Hezbollah does not want the system to collapse. Hezbollah wanted the system to stay because this system really is catered and designed by Hezbollah to implement its agenda. Corruption is a high policy for Hezbollah, and corruption is the main tool for Hezbollah's infiltration into state institutions. And this was a big blow for Hezbollah when people started to realize that actually Hezbollah is responsible for all this, and Hezbollah is protecting everyone. It's the umbrella that is protecting corruption. And then the 2020 Beirut port blast. When this happened, it was people really thought that it was just like a corruption system that led to a mistake that led to the blast. So it was in 2020 when the investigation into the Beirut blast was led by Judge Tariq Bitar, reached a point where Wafi Safa, the security head of the security of Hezbollah in Lebanon, went to his office in front of everybody and threatened him, told him, if you don't stop, we will stop you. And when Hezbollah says that, means we will kill you. So Judge Bitar is still continuing, but he's tied with many lawsuits and many hindrances put in front of his path to justice by Hezbollah and others. And it was very clear for all the Lebanese that when Wafi Safa did this in public and told Judge Bitar to stop, and then afterwards they started a clash in Tayuni, in a Christian neighborhood, which is very symbolic because this is where the civil war has started. It also made it very clear for the people that Hezbollah is going to stop this investigation at any cost, even if it means civil war. And that was the message that Hezbollah wanted to pass. And they got to a point where they understood that the Lebanese people no longer support them, that they are today considered an Iranian occupation of Lebanon, Iranian occupation by proxy, obviously. They are Lebanese, but they are an Iranian militia, and everybody understands this now. The perception in Lebanon today is that Hezbollah is no longer the resistance. Hezbollah is no longer there to protect Lebanon. Hezbollah is there to occupy Lebanon. And today, Hezbollah faces a real dilemma in the sense that it's still in control of state institutions. It's still in control of the decision-making. But at the same time, Hezbollah understands that if this goes on, especially with the increased security incidents against or by the Lebanese population, and I can count many, including the Shia incident 2 years ago, when in a Druze town of Shia, when the people stopped a Hezbollah vehicle carrying rockets to be launched against Israel. And they actually took it. The army retrieved the rockets and handed them back to Hezbollah. Another incident was with the Khaldi incidents, where the tribes of Khaldi, the Sunni tribes of Khaldi, attacked Hezbollah and killed someone. And this was really, it's still going on because the Lebanese authority are still going after the Khaldi residents and the people who were part of this demonstration and then the clashes instead of Hezbollah. And then most recently, of course, and the Tayuni incident where the Christian neighborhood, where Hezbollah invaded basically that neighborhood with much violence, the people actually shot at them and killed some Hezbollah members. And most recently, obviously, the Kahali incident, just a couple of weeks ago when the Hezbollah vehicle was overturned, and this had an accident basically and overturned, and then the people realized that there was weapons in this vehicle and there were clashes. And more of these incidents are happening. Meanwhile, Hezbollah is assassinating Lebanese activists. They have, since 2005 until today, have killed from Rafiq al-Hariri, which is proven that was Hezbollah, and many others. And now, until recently, Luqman Slim, and then Joe Bajani, and then Fadi Bajani, and then others who either are activists or just people who confronted Hezbollah or people who had evidence against Hezbollah. They're just killing people inside Lebanon. More and more outrage against Hezbollah is being seen in the Christian street mainly, but also in the Sunni street and the Shia street. But a lot of these people understand that a civil war is not an option. because civil war in Lebanon means that you have two people with equal capabilities, military capabilities, right? Like the civil war in Lebanon in 1975, it was definitely a war that lasted for more than 10 years, but because each party were armed, each side was armed almost equally. This time, a civil war of the Christian militias, let's say the Christian parties, decided to go to war against Hezbollah. It's not gonna end well for them. It will not last, and Hezbollah has enough arms. Hezbollah is an army, and they can defeat everyone. We've seen it in 2008. We've seen it. Like they might be able to cause Hezbollah some casualties, but it's mostly going to be an expression at a very high cost. So today Hezbollah is very much confident of its own military power. It's very much confident of its own control over Lebanon's institutions, but they also are not confident on the long run. They are not confident that the outrage inside Lebanon's Christian community, Sunni community is quiet because it doesn't have a proper leadership, but it is definitely anti-Hezbollah. They know that this outrage eventually is going to lead, this outrage and unpopularity, raising unpopularity, is going to lead to the next parliamentary elections. Doesn't sound good for them. Already last year in the parliamentary elections, they lost. And they had to really put all the resources and aggressive behavior, especially in the south, in order to guarantee at least, the Shia vote. And we know what happened in the south. Lebanon witnessed some kind, like to a certain extent, some kind of, like semi-democratic elections last year. But the south, the Shia areas, the south, Dahi, the Beqa, it wasn't elections. The Shia did not really vote for Hezbollah. One, the percentage is very low, but also we know how it happened. Like Hezbollah officials went to every house and said, when you go and vote, you take a screenshot of your vote, of your ballot, and you send it to me. And when you do that, we know who you voted for. And if you didn't vote for our person, there will be consequences. A lot of people voted for them out of fear. A lot of people voted them out of benefits because they also threatened with cutting aid, like food and necessities. So people know what it means to go against Hezbollah in the south, especially that this elections happened right after the assassination of Luqman Saleem, which was a clear message to the Shia community: in no means death. So they know eventually they can't keep this up, because next time there's elections, the loss that they suffered in the recent elections is going to be doubled and tripled and even more. The Christian community is still divided between the FPM and the Lebanese forces and the Kata'ib, but the FPM is losing popularity over, and it's unbelievable how it shrank over the years since 2005 until the recent parliamentary elections. And even with Gibran Bassil and his party winning many parliamentary seats, it didn't win through the Christian votes. It won through the Shia votes. They made it very clear that they have to, play the elections. And they know that next time the results might be worse and they might lose more access to state institutions. They cannot really gain the popularity of the Lebanese people unless they can provide for everyone, and they cannot. They cannot stop their aggressiveness because they need everyone to be afraid, because fear now has replaced loyalty and love. So fear is the only way to keep people in line, and they cannot stop it and they cannot provide for them. So their plan eventually is, one, to get their president in Baghdad, Sulaiman Franji, no one else. And they really need eventually long-term plan to make sure that their structure of power in Lebanon has to be changed. And this is something that they've been talking about for a very, very long time. And this is the best time to achieve it, because they know that the country is falling apart, and if they call for a conference to revise the political structure in Lebanon, which was stipulated by the Ta'if agreement that ended the civil war in Lebanon in 1990, this is the time to do it again, because this is another big crisis that needs to end with another political conference. But their plan is to use the demographics of Lebanon in order to change the power structure, instead of the two power structure, like the half Christians, half Muslims in the parliament, which was actually the case, and that was structured by Ta'if. What they want is to divide it like three-way power sharing, which is 1/3 Christians, 1/3 Sunni, 1/3 Shia, which in this way they will be able to get more seats in the parliament. It is representative, that's very true, but it is also very dangerous, because when 1/3 of the parliament is represented by Iran's militia in Lebanon, it can be very, very dangerous. But this is one way of them to consolidate their power for a very long term. Another issue they have to resolve is the finance. They have been making a lot of money from Captagon, a lot of money in Iraq, a lot of money in Africa, but this is becoming also known, and a lot of measures have been made in order to contain this. And even if they were able to make that much money to compensate for the loss of money coming from Iran, they still need to figure out how to cater for the community and the Lebanese people, what the state institutions cannot. They cannot fill that void. They cannot buy and run the internet. They cannot run the electricity. They cannot run, they're actually making money out of electricity, alternative electricity, which is the generators in Lebanon. They really need to consolidate their power, but they have to do it via fear rather than loyalty, and until something else happens. And regarding their recent skirmishes along the border with Israel, this is a very dangerous development. They need, I think, they really need to, Iran basically needs to send a message to Israel saying that Hezbollah has not forgotten about you. It's no longer in the region only. They are back on the Lebanon's borders. And Hezbollah is ready for a war if you dare strike Iran. And the Iranians need the Israelis to understand this message. And Hezbollah also needs to regain its resistance narrative, which has been lost throughout the years. And Hezbollah needs to tell also the Lebanese people that despite the maritime border agreement, when Hezbollah basically endorsed it, and everybody in Lebanon was shocked that Hezbollah has endorsed it, and realized that this is like usually the resistance that would never do that. So despite the maritime agreement, despite the fact that Hezbollah has not retaliated against any of Israeli strikes in Syria or anywhere, that they need to regain the resistance rhetoric, because they know that the loss of the resistance rhetoric means the loss of a lot of rhetoric and presence and legitimacy in Lebanon. So what do? The next step today is Hezbollah will probably continue doing these calculated skirmishes along the borders with some clashes that are expected. So today, it's really up to Israel. Is Israel going to respond to Hezbollah or not? If Israel is going to respond and not ignore this, then probably the response is going to be also calculated, because we know also that Israel doesn't want a war with Lebanon, especially at this time. And Hezbollah knows they're doing this at a time when Israel is going through a serious internal crisis, serious internal divisions. And they know that this is the best time to do this. If there's any time for Hezbollah to tickle Israel or bother Israel or do anything that would achieve its agenda, this is the time to do it, because this is when Israel cannot really afford a war. And if Israel can afford a war right now, then they probably will respond to Hezbollah. And if they respond to Hezbollah, I don't think that any response, which is not a full-fledged war, would get Hezbollah to go to a full-fledged war. I think all the responses along the border, however it escalates, will be calculated by both countries. And I know that Hezbollah's responses will definitely be calculated. It will help them regain the resistance rhetoric. But also they know that a full-fledged war is not something that anyone needs and no one is going to afford. Their plan now is to consolidate their power in the region, to increase their financial gains, to establish their economic alternatives, and to make sure that their fighting force is ready, because it's not. They're still rehabilitating their fighting force after Syria. And a lot of people are joining Hezbollah today because they're still paying in hard currency, in dollars. But the loyalty that really was the core of Hezbollah's fighting force is no longer there. They need to work on that. And it's something that they need to work on before going into any war. And this is their goal today. That's why any clash with Israel today, any conflict with Israel today, I don't see Hezbollah going for full-fledged war, neither Israel. But something's going to give when it comes to increased border skirmishes. That what is Hezbollah's next step and what is Israel's next step. So it's going to be one for one. And I'm going to stop now, and I can cover any of these issues in depth during the Q&A. I know that we're limited in time, so if you want me to stop now, I can stop, and we can go to each of these topics, whether the Israeli issue, the internal popularity, the Shia community, the economic, regional, anything. I'm happy to talk about.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This is actually only a half-hour program, so we're already running over. But if you wouldn't mind answering a couple questions, we have multiple people who have asked, is the Lebanese army completely under Hezbollah's control, or do they still have some autonomy?
Oh, this is a very good question. I would love to talk about that. I'm actually working on something more detailed on this issue. The Lebanese army is a big institution. It's not just one institution. It's several institutions. A lot of these institutions are under Hezbollah's control. The presidential guards are under Hezbollah's control. The military intelligence is under Hezbollah's control. The military court tribunal is under Hezbollah's control. But there are a number of units within the army that are not. And that's basically because of the generals and the commanders within the army that are not affiliated with Hezbollah's agenda, that are closer to, let's say, the Lebanese forces, the Kata'ib, the others. So there are a number of commanders and generals inside the Lebanese state institutions, Lebanese security institutions in general, but the army in particular, that still oppose Hezbollah's agenda. And you can see this difference. For example, I'll give you the example of the recent Kahali incident versus the Tayuni incident, where the army was involved against Hezbollah. Kahali, obviously, the army went against the people, protected Hezbollah's weapons, and fought with the people. They were very cooperative and collaborative with Hezbollah. And that's because the unit there and its commander were not something that is under Hezbollah's control or has, a chain that is under Hezbollah's control. In Kahali, the case was different. The army actually shot at Hezbollah. The army not in Kahali, in Tayuni. In Tayuni clashes, the army protected the people of Tayuni, and the army actually shot at Hezbollah. And that's what actually stopped it. So this is a big difference. And it's easy to say the army from the commandment at the end of the day will do whatever. It's true, there are a lot of work that is being done by Hezbollah within the institution to ensure the big decisions. But there are elements that are great opportunities. And today the U.S. still helps the Lebanese army, technical support, money, salaries even. So this is a big opportunity. But the way it is done without any revision of the units, without that, there are certain units that need to be supported. There are certain units that do not need to be supported. There are certain appointments that need to be really impacted by U.S. policy, and there are certain appointments that can be ignored and others cannot. So I think this aid is a huge and amazing leverage. It should not stop, but it has to be used as a leverage in order to restructure this aid to the people who deserve it, and not to everyone.
Thank you so much. We also had multiple people ask about if there was, by chance, a war with Israel and Hezbollah, is there any chance the Lebanese people would support Israel and not Hezbollah?
Oh yeah, definitely. For example, like it's not like black and white, right? So the Lebanese people do not like Hezbollah today. In last war with Israel in 2006, Hezbollah still had popularity among a lot of communities, not just the Shia community. Today, everybody wants Hezbollah out. So you look at the Syrian regime and the opposition, the Syrian people, not just the opposition. When Israel strikes Iranian and Hezbollah and sometimes Syrian facilities in Syria, people rejoice. They like it. In Lebanon, it's going to be a little bit more complicated because striking Hezbollah in Lebanon means going through citizens, because Hezbollah use people as a shield, like institutions, infrastructure, as a human shield. And they protect themselves with the people. So there will be a lot more casualties. So this is tricky because the people will be with Israel in this war, because it will be definitely, the sentiment against Hezbollah is growing to the extent that anyone who will take Hezbollah out is welcome. However, people don't want to die. People had enough. People don't want wars, and people cannot afford more casualties and more tragedies in Lebanon. So going after Hezbollah, meaning killing civilians, and that's not going to pass. That will kill the Lebanese sentiments towards, or at least, this kind of taking stand. So it's very complicated in Lebanon, because going after Hezbollah means so many casualties, and this will shift the rhetoric. And I've seen this many times when the rhetoric has been shifted, and the vision and the stances have been shifted because of casualties. So I don't think it's black and white.
Absolutely. Thank you. And for the final question, what exactly would you recommend for what the Western countries, international community? Is there any sort of power vacuum that could be attained, or political policies that you think should be enacted?
Yeah, absolutely. I have so many, but I'm going to stick to 2 or 3 that I think are doable, realistic recommendations. One I've already mentioned with the Lebanese army. Look at the aid and make sure that people who deserve it receive it, use it as a leverage. The second one is that to avoid a war, because, everybody doesn't want a war in Lebanon. The Israelis don't want war, Lebanese don't want war, and nobody wants to see casualties. I'm Lebanese and I cannot call for war against Lebanon, but I know that even, no one wants it. So I think in a way to get the people understand how Hezbollah is using them as human shields. And this is by exposing how this is happening. People don't know that they have actually Hezbollah's missiles under their homes and infrastructure. And I'm not talking about the airport and the state infrastructures. I'm talking about homes. I'm talking about schools. People don't know that. And I've seen it, people discover after war that they have actually missiles in their land or in their homes, under their homes. They don't know that. Make them understand. And then people will realize what that means. And I think exposing Hezbollah's human shields in Lebanon, Hezbollah's strategy to hide behind people in Lebanon would be much more effective than actually any kind of messaging. But this would be a very important messaging, and one that would actually not just avoid a war at this point, but raise awareness in Lebanon against Hezbollah. And 3, I think when it comes to the U.S., but actually, exposing Hezbollah cannot come from Israel. No one takes Israel seriously in Lebanon, so it cannot come from Israel. So the last thing I would say, Hezbollah's sanctions against Hezbollah is symbolic, because their economy is cash economy, but sanctions against their allies is very effective. And today, their allies are financial institutions. And you can refer to my recent study on cash cabal with all the details. I'm not going to go into details. Financial institutions, financial figures, private business sector in Lebanon that are today allied with Hezbollah are the best target for sanctions, because this is where you go after Hezbollah's cash economy in Lebanon today and hamper them.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I feel like we just scratched the surface here. So
Yes.
could you please tell our viewers where we can find some more of your work?
Yes, all my work, my recent work for the last 7 years, basically, which is mostly policy work, is on my profile, expert profile at the Washington Institute website. The Washington Institute is a think tank based in Washington, and I'm a senior fellow there. You just go to the website of the Washington Institute, expert profile, my name, you'll find everything there. And if you're interested in more details, please ask.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, we've come
You're
to the
welcome.
close of our webinar. Thank you again, Ms. Ghaddar, for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.